Well, hello there, and welcome back to another Night of the Movies podcast. And in these podcasts, I talk all things movies and TV and whatever I want, whenever I want. And in today's podcast, I'm reviewing Meg 2, The Trench. But just before I do that, I should say what I say at the start of every podcast I do, which is, if you are watching this podcast on YouTube, hello there to my viewers. But you prefer to listen to your podcasts, well, you can with this one as well at Night of the Movies on Spotify. And if you are already listening to this podcast on Spotify, hello there to podcast listeners, then you can also check the podcast out visually on my YouTube channel and Night of the Movies on that platform too. Likewise, wherever you may be watching or listening to the podcast, don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the podcast, of course, and leave me some feedback on things to improve on in future podcasts, because there's always things to improve on, and feedback is, as ever, much appreciated. Also, just before I get into my review of Meg 2, I should say this. Earlier today I went swimming, and I've spoken about it before on the channel. When I go swimming, I often get this thing I like to call fuzzy thinking, where I just don't think straight, because that's what swimming does to you. So if I don't make my point as coherently as possible in this podcast, and if I say a sentence that doesn't make any sense, it's just because of the way my brain's working right now after being swimming not too long ago. So anyway, yes, a little warning there if I if I display fuzzy thinking at any point during this podcast today. But other than that, this would be a great and fun podcast to listen to and or watch. So let's get into it. The Meg 2, The Trench. So, this is directed by Ben Wheatley and is the sequel to the first Meg film, which I think came out in 2018, if I'm not mistaken. I might be mistaken there, because I must admit, I haven't seen it. I haven't seen the first Meg. But the reason I went to go and watch this one, though, is because, as already mentioned, it's directed by Ben Wheatley, and if you don't know who Ben Wheatley is, he previously directed Free Fire, which I wasn't the biggest fan of, but I liked some parts of it. And he also directed Sightseers, though. And if you haven't seen Sightseers, it's so clever and it's so funny, and it's a dark comedy that's so unique and imaginative and just absolutely brilliant. I love that movie. And that film made me intrigued to see this one, though, because Ben Wheatley has clearly shown that he's a good director with lower budget films, and I want to see what he was like with a big budget movie, with the Meg 2 at that. And you know what? I like the trailers for this film as well. They looked like they were self-referential and in with the joke of a big giant shark movie that's just dumb fun. That's what the trailers looked like. There were some really funny moments in the trailers where every single time I got a Meg 2 trailer in a cinema, I would laugh out loud. Like, there's one moment in the trailer where a character goes, "Oh, this glass is Meg-proof," and then I think 5 seconds later in the trailer, the Meg just goes through the glass and eats that person alive. And I loved that the trailer. It looked so funny. And you know, sometimes you just want to go to cinema and watch a dumb action movie that takes your mind off the day you are having. And that's another reason I went to go watch this film. So even if I haven't seen the first Meg, this one looked like it could be a bit of fun that took my mind off the day I was having. I wasn't going into this film expecting one of the best films of the year. I just wanted a bit of enjoyment. And I also loved the marketing for this movie. I saw pictures of fins, and they were Meg fins, based on the movies, swimming around the Thames in London. And I thought that was genius marketing. And actually, I loved that about it. I loved that about this movie. That is the best part of Meg 2, The Trench. Because, honestly, this film is absolutely atrocious. It's just awful. I was looking forward to seeing it. I was, because I thought it was going to be self-referential fun, and I would sit in there and there'd be some inside jokes, you know, because I felt like the filmmakers were in on the joke with the audience about we're making a dumb, fun, sharp movie, and I thought there were going to be some really good action sequences, and you get none of that. All this stuff in the trailer is the last 20 minutes of the film. The last 20 minutes or so of the film is what you see in the trailer. Honestly, if you if you were thinking about watching this movie, I wouldn't really recommend it. Just watch the trailer. That's what I've titled this podcast today. Just watch the trailer if you're thinking about watching this movie, because you'll see everything that is good about this film in the trailer. The rest of the film is complete and utter nonsense. There is dialogue in the film that feels like it's being written by somebody who has never spoken to anyone before. There's dialogue in the film which just isn't what people would say to one another. The script feels like, and I say script in, I say script with, a huge asterisk around it, because I don't actually know if a script was used for this film. I'm generally not sure, but the script, the quote-unquote script, feels like it was written in a day. In fact, it feels like it was written in a night. It doesn't feel like there's been any work put into the script, and yet at the same time, the film is trying to be too serious for the first hour and a half. It isn't until you get to the last 20 minutes or so where the film starts to just take itself less seriously. But the first 90 minutes is like, we have to set up all these plot points. Oh, there's all this going on. There's actually a character that's working for the bad guys. Oh, that's actually antagonists in the film. By the way, the antagonists in this movie are not the Megs. They're actual people. That is one of the biggest mistakes you have in a movie like this. Like, look at Jaws. The main villain in Jaws is the shark, and I'm not saying I wanted the film to be Jaws, although that would have been nice, but at the same time though, take inspiration from that. Take inspiration from that and not have your main villain be a person and a really unbelievable character that is just a really annoying person who keeps showing up and he's angry and you're never really sure why he's angry, and he is one of those mustache twirling villains. The villain in this movie is. He may as well have a big long mustache, and he goes, ha ha ha, this is my plan, I'm going to put it into action, look at what I am about to do. That's what it feels like with the villain in this film. And all the action sequences are completely just nonsensical as well. There's no coherence to the action sequence in this film. There's no structure to the action. It feels like Ben Wheatley was behind the camera during certain moments. Like, do you want to have an action sequence here? Yeah. What do you want to do? I don't know. Think about whatever. Just do whatever you want. I'll put you in front of the camera and do whatever action pose you want at this specific moment. It feels like there's been no planning gone into the action sequence in the film. I will say there is one piece of action in this movie which I found mildly, and I mean mildly, enjoyable. I didn't love it, I just found it okay, and that was a sequence involving Jason Statham, and that's not how I pronounce his name, is it? Jason Statham, yeah, that's how I pronounce his name. He is on a jet ski and he's being chased by Megs, and that action sequence I liked. I thought it was okay. I didn't love it, I thought it was okay. All the action sequences in the movie feel like they've been borrowed off other films, and they feel like there's no planning in them, and it's just random action sequences thrown next to each other, and there's no coherent structure, no reason to these action sequences. It just becomes visual noise. I heard this said from a film review which I watch quite a lot: action without purpose is just visual noise, and you get a lot of that in this film. And the plot is way too convoluted for a film like this. Why do we have to have a plot? No one is going to a Meg film expecting... No one is going to a Meg film wanting to know what the plot's going to be. They just want to see Jason Statham fight some sharks, and yet this film is trying to do all these serious things with a plot, and in reality, it just should be the Megs are back, and there's more of them. That's what the sequel should be, and yet there's all this other stuff going on. There's a villain in this film, as you already mentioned. I'm like, why are you doing all this? Just have Jason Statham and his crew fighting more Megs. From what I understand, in the first movie, he's just fighting the one Meg. In this film, he should have been fighting more Megs. And yet, that's not what the film is, really. There's a whole half an hour of this film, and I'm not exaggerating, I'm not making this up. There's a whole half an hour of this movie which doesn't involve any sharks or any creatures. And when the sharks do come back later on in the film, they add some other creatures into this movie. Like, they had this giant octopus in there, and I'm like, Really? Where's that come from? There's no reason to why a giant octopus is in this movie whatsoever. And then there are the little creatures that can swim and can walk on land, and they're in the film, and I wasn't really sure what they were and what they were doing and what was the point of them. And there are Megs in this film. You do get the giant shark creatures, the giant shark-like creatures, but I don't know, it felt there wasn't enough of them. It felt like they were overshadowed by this unnecessarily convoluted plot and dull characters and everything else. The film was trying to make you care too much about the characters when, in actuality, the characters aren't that interesting in this movie. There's no character development, really, with any of the characters. No characterization with any of the characters. There's nothing going on with any of the characters in this movie. And the storylines are really forgettable. The whole film's really forgettable. And it's just nonsense. You're watching it, it's just nonsense, and it's pulling in all these different directions, and it wants to be about 5 other different movies, which is ripping off. There's a whole section of the film which wants to be James Cameron's The Abyss, which I love. I love that film. It's one of my favourite films of all time. I adore it to pieces. And when it was trying to be The Abyss in this movie, when this movie was trying to be The Abyss, I was sat there going, oh, I haven't seen The Abyss in a while. I ought to get out again, because that's a really damn good movie, particularly the director's cut, which I haven't seen in a very long while. Oh, and there's another section of the film which is trying to be Aliens. I remember how good that film was. Oh, it's another James Cameron movie. Oh yeah, James Cameron's a really good director. Oh right, this film's awful. That's what I was feeling, that's what I was thinking when I was watching this film. And then when you get towards the end of the movie, it wants to be Jaws. Obviously it does, because it's ripping off Jaws quite a lot, and I'm fine about that. You know, not every shark movie can be Jaws, but there's a whole section of the movie where it wants to be Jaws, and then it wants to be a piranha movie, it feels like. And then there's a whole section of the film when it wants to be Jurassic Park. In fact, there's one small sequence in a helicopter in the later stage of the film which completely rips off one of my favourite scenes from Jurassic Park. And again, I was sitting there going, I mean, they're not even trying to cover it up. That isn't even a homage to Jurassic Park. They're just straight up ripping off Jurassic Park there. Like, what? Why are you doing that? It wants to be about 5 other different better movies, and in reality, it suffers because of that. The film really should have been 90 minutes. It really should have been 90, or even less than 90 minutes of that, and had this self-reflexive plots and story and characters which are making fun of the situations they're in. And you get a bit of that in the last 20 minutes of the film, but by that point, it was too little too late. It was too little too late. I wasn't caring about what was going on in the last 10-20 minutes, and I wasn't finding it funny because I'd already lost interest. I'd already been too unengaged to the point that when we got into the last 20 minutes, I just wanted to end. Because I was like, I've seen all the best stuff in the trailers. Clearly, they put all the best stuff in the trailers, and all the stuff that doesn't make any sense, they didn't put in the trailers. And like, let's just get people to think this is a really fun and self-referential film, and that we're on the joke. That's what it feels like the producers and the filmmakers behind this movie were trying to do, but when you get to sit down and watch the movie, though, it's trying to do too much. So, this is an add-on. One thing I want to mention when I was doing my podcast was the fact that in the middle of the film, around about the 45-minute, 50-minute mark, I mean, I'm not sure for certain, I wasn't looking at my phone or checking the time or anything, but in the middle of the movie, it felt like I was falling in and out of sleep in the cinema, which I don't usually do, and I wasn't really that tired either. It was just because of how unengaging the film was. I was falling in and out of sleep, which I don't usually do, but the only reason I woke up from my dozing, if you will, was because there was some guy being eaten by a shark and it was really loud. Everything else, yeah, if it wasn't that loud, then I probably would have woken up from my sleep. But anyway, just wanted to add that in there, that this film sent me to sleep. Yeah, that's right, a dumb, giant shark movie that should be wildly entertaining sent me to sleep. Wow. Anyway, back to the podcast. And in all seriousness, the biggest problem with this film, and the biggest reason many sequels don't work, is that it doesn't have a story to tell. And I know that might sound stupid, but that's the reason many sequels do work, because they've got a story to tell. It's the reason that Empire Strikes Back it works. It's the reason that Godfather Part 2 works. It's the reason that Shrek 2 works. It's the reason that Home Alone 2 works. It's the reason that Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, which I viewed earlier this year, there's a reason that that film worked. It's a reason that most sequels work, because they have a story to tell, and you don't get that with Meg 2. It doesn't have a story to tell. I know that might sound stupid on the surface, but if this film did something new and different and fresh and unique, it actually had a story that it wanted to tell, it wouldn't be such a bad watch. In fact, it'd be quite entertaining, and I might be sitting there going, oh, this film was wildly entertaining. That's what I would be sitting here doing, but because the story doesn't have a story to tell, and because it's got all these huge problems, it's just a really disappointing. It's not really disappointing to me. It's just a really terrible film. I was about to say I was disappointed by it. Disappointed by it would give the idea that I was very excited by this movie and I heard a lot of great things about it before I saw it. I wasn't very excited to see this film. I mean, on my way to the cinema, I was looking forward to it, but I wasn't very excited to see it. You know what I mean? And, oh god, the film, you know, as I already said, it feels like a cash grab. Going back onto that whole thing where it doesn't have a story to tell, this film really feels like a cash grab. And I understand every movie from a big studio is a cash grab. You know, they need to make money, so I understand that, but it doesn't change the fact that this film felt more like a cash grab than most other films I've watched recently, which is saying a lot. The monsters in this film don't really make sense to come in and out of it, and the CGI in the film looks really poor for the most part. It looks like video game CGI or video game VFX that you get in an Xbox game. It's not something you would expect in a movie like this, and it's really poorly directed too, which is saddening to say, because I consider myself a fan of Ben Wheatley. I didn't love his film Free Fire, but there's things about that film which I admire, and if I was looking at Free Fire and compared to this, Free Fire looks like a masterpiece in comparison to this film, if I was to compare both. And I really loved his film Sightseers though, and I really can't wait to see what he does next, because I think he's a director who decides to direct normally some very interesting stories and does some quite unique movies that, you know, don't always work, but can work quite a lot, with the example I've already used as Sightseers. But this film, it feels like he didn't know what to do. It feels like he just didn't know what to do with the directing this movie, and there was no coherent structure to it whatsoever, and the directing is really bad. Like, it's really bad. And again, that's saddening to say, because I think Ben Wheatley is a great filmmaker, but he needs to go back to low budget movies, at least for now. You know, I can see him directing a great, and I mean a great blockbuster within the next 10 years. But I don't know if he can do that again. I don't know if he can do that in the next couple of years. That's what I meant to say. I don't know if he can do that in the next couple of years, because this movie really showed that I think when he's got all this money, he just wants to do too much, and he doesn't know when to rein it in. He doesn't know when to rein it in, and that's just saying, because I honestly, when Ben Wheatley was attached to this film, when I heard it was attached to the movie, I legitimately thought it could be a good film, or at least entertaining and self-referential, like the trailers were implying. No, that's not what happened, and yeah, that's a real shame to say, because I think Ben Wheatley is a good filmmaker. Look at Sightseers, watch Sightseers if you don't believe me, but he did a really bad job with this film. Right, so this is an add-on. One thing I just wanted to say is that this movie should have just been self-referential, with some really exciting action sequences that actually have some enthusiasm behind them. But you don't get that in the film. There's no enthusiasm in the filmmaking. For the most part, the directing is, like I mentioned already, pretty damn poor, which is a shame to say. So, yeah, it should have had some enthusiasm to it, though. And it just feels lazy for the most part, which is what it is. And it should have been more self-referential either. Why wasn't it? Why didn't it make some jokes about what was happening? Makes a couple of them, but I didn't find them funny. Because by that point, it was too little too late. But anyway, back to the podcast at hand. And I don't understand what point it got to where all the filmmakers and all the producers and everybody involved with the film sat down and watched the final cut of the movie and went, "That's it, we've cracked it. Oh, well done, guys. Let's crack open the champagne." I don't understand when that point happened. Because none of this makes any sense. It really feels like the filmmakers behind this movie got into the edit and just went like this with the edit board. Just put their hands on, like, oh, let's just put this all randomly together. There's not really any structure to it. And let's just hope it works. And it'll make money because we'll advertise it as a really fun and poppy summer blockbuster. But it's just rubbish. Like, it's rubbish. It's just so bad. And as I already mentioned, the best part of the film is the marketing. It's nothing in this movie. I really like the marketing, and it was one of the reasons I went to come watch this film. Everything else in the movie is pretty much awful. I will say the musical score by Harry Gregson Williams isn't bad. It's not a bad musical score. I wouldn't say it's great, but it's not bad. And so that's a little redeeming feature, and I liked that one sequence with Jason Statham on a jet ski. And the thing is, I like Jason Statham. Whenever I watch a Jason Statham action movie, you know, I can enjoy it. I think it's a really good action star. I thought it was really funny and spy, and yeah, I like Jason Statham. And you know, sometimes you're in the mood to watch a Jason Statham film. But this is not a good Jason Statham action movie. In fact, for the most part, he looked bored in this film. It looked like there was a sign on his head that was like, "I'm here for the paycheck," and nothing else but the paycheck. And listen, here's the thing. In the end, there were some people in my cinema that were enjoying this film. That's what it sounded like. And so, you know, if you are thinking about watching The Meg 2, I know that I did say earlier I wouldn't just watch the trailer instead, but, you know, all film is subjective, and there were some people in my cinema who were enjoying the movie, and there are parts of it which I can see why they'd be enjoyable, at least a little bit, and, you know, you might get something out of some of the action sequences. I mean, I didn't, but, again, it's all subjective, and there were some people enjoying the film in my cinema. And, you know, maybe my expectations were too high. They weren't. And maybe I was expecting too much. Maybe I was expecting Jaws. I wasn't. I can swear you, I wasn't. I was expecting dumb fun. And maybe maybe it just wasn't for me because it's a dumb action movie. There are plenty of dumb action movies I really love, and so maybe those are the reasons I don't love this movie. Maybe it's because my expectations are too high. Maybe it's because I don't really like dumb action movies. I do. I just want to say this now. I do. I'm being sarcastic there. I actually really enjoy some dumb action movies, like Face Off with Nicolas Cage and John Travolta. That film makes no sense whatsoever. Love it to pieces. And, you know, maybe it just didn't meet what my expectations were. But that wasn't the case. I'm just making all that up. Honestly, I don't really know how this review's gone, but you get the point. I hate this movie, and everything that is good about the film is in the trailer. That one little bit I spoke about earlier with, oh, this glass is Meg-proof, and then the Meg comes through and eats that person alive. That's not even done as a self-referential joke actually in the context of the film. That's meant to be a really serious scene. And in the trailer, they played it off as a joke. In the film, it's meant to be serious. Why? And it's not as self-referential as the trailer's implied. And honestly, watch the movie if you feel like if you feel like you want to, I suppose. But if you're not really interested in the film, just watch the trailer. And that pretty much gives you everything that is good about the movie and everything you need to know about the film. Just watch the trailer. It's just... Yeah, it's absolutely awful. I'm bored talking about the film. I can't believe I talked about the Meg to the Trench for over 20 minutes. Man alive, I ramble on sometimes. But all in all, I'm going to say that Meg to the Trench, I'm going to say that it's a 1.5 out of 10. The reason I'm giving it a 1.5 is because that 0.5, I think the musical score was decent. I didn't think it was great. Again, I just thought it was fine and it worked what it was. And I liked the scene with the jet ski with Jason Statham. Everything else is just atrocious in this film and just one big monstrosity. It's not even fun. It's just not even fun after a while. It's not even fun at all, really. Like, the beginning's not even fun. I really don't get what they were trying to do with this movie. It's honestly, it just feels like a bunch of random scenes placed together with no real coherence and plot points that make no sense whatsoever, and moments of action which feel like there's been no planning on them whatsoever, and a completely nonsensical plot which is way too convoluted. A villain which has the biggest mustache you can imagine and is just so generic, and the fact that the villain isn't the Meg is one of the film's biggest misfires, and it's a very unengaging film, and it was a very unengaging movie watching experience for me, and it's not nearly as enjoyable as it should be. This film should be stupidly fun. It should be stupidly entertaining, but it's not, and it's not even fun, which is a really big shame to say, and it's just, I mean, it's awful. What did you expect in the end, though? Like, the film's called Meg to the Trench. It doesn't really make any sense. I still don't understand the trench bit in the title. Anyway, as I've already spoken about, this movie is just, I mean, it's atrocious. And just watch the trailer. Just watch the trailer, and that tells you everything that's good about the movie and everything you need to know about the film. And then don't watch anything else, because the rest of the movie is it's so bad. Like, I really don't understand the point. When the filmmakers sat around with the actual cut of this film, with the final cut of this movie, and went, we cracked that, now that is a good movie. Open the champagne. You know, I don't understand when that happened with this film. It's just terrible. I hated it. And it might be my worst movie of the year so far. Fast X is a good contender, but this might be my worst movie of the year so far. But I'll think about that more when I look back on the films of the year at the end of this year. But for now, yeah, I hate this movie if you hadn't got it already, and I would recommend that if you have any interest in the film, yeah, this is what I'm going to say. If you have any interest in the movie, just watch the trailer. Just watch the trailer. God, this film was bad. I don't know what earth they were thinking, but yeah. I absolutely despised this movie. And so, all in all, as I've already mentioned, I'm going to say that Meg to the Trench, I'm going to say that it's a 1.5 out of 10 from me. Anyway, guys, that is it for this podcast for today. Thank you, as always, for watching or listening. And if you have seen Meg to the Trench, let me know your thoughts on it in the comment section below, because maybe you loved it. You know, that's a beautiful thing about movies. You may have gone into this film and you may have come out of it with a really different perspective on life and what films can do to you. And if that was the case, well, I'm very glad for you. But personally, I came out pretty I came out wondering what I just spent the last couple hours of my time doing. But, you know, that's just me. So let me know your thoughts on Meg to the Trench in the comment section below. And if you haven't yet, please do click down below and like and subscribe on this podcast. And look forward to many more podcasts coming very soon on this channel. Thank you as always for watching or listening, and I will see you guys again soon. But bye for now. Bye.